Hello and welcome. This is a video lecture on Emily Dickinson's poem I Cannot Live With You. Let us first understand what this poem is all about. This poem is considered to be a part of the Master series, which is actually a set of letters and poems which was addressed to an elder man. Here, this elder man could be either Samuel Bowles, who was the editor of the Wentworth Republican, which was a popular newspaper back then, or it would be Charles Wadworth, who was an employee of the church. This poem actually discusses the dilemma of Emily Dickinson's faith, and this is a common theme which runs through most of her poetry. We also know that Emily Dickinson as a person had stopped attending church and the church services very early in her life, and she did not believe in the Puritan idea of the God. But she keeps debating the idea of faith through many of her poems, and this is one such poem. So let us go over the poem stanza by stanza and try to understand what these stanzas mean. So in the first three stanzas, she's actually debating, she's actually putting out the argument that she will not be able to live with her lover, and then she gives you various reasons why. Over the next few stanzas, she also gives other reasons why she will not be able to die with her lover, or towards the end she also says why she will not be able to get any redemption with her lover. So in any case, she builds the argument that she would not be able to be with her lover given any situation. So the first three stanzas are about how the world which they inhabit is not enough for them to be together, and here she gives you various reasons. So let me just read the stanzas one by one. I cannot live with you, it would be life, and life is over there behind the shelf. The sexton keeps the key to putting up our life, his porcelain like a cup, discarded of the housewife, quaint or broke. A newer Severus pleases, old ones crack. Here the meaning of Severus is porcelain, new kinds of porcelain, which is fashionable French porcelain, and the word sexton means a church employee. So basically she talks about how mortal lives are not anything more than broken crockery or discarded crockery of a housewife. So mortal life is to God what broken crockery is to a housewife. So she's like, just like broken, discarded crockery of a housewife, our lives are like that to the church. Here she says it feels like she's not interested in redemption, and therefore she can say whatever she is saying about the church. Sexton, as I said, is a church officer who's representative of the church, who's representative of the puritanical idea of God, who doesn't care, who chooses who to save and who not to save, and you don't have control as to whether you will be the chosen one. So these are the dilemmas that she says in the first stanzas. Let us look at the second two stanzas. She says, I cannot die with you. Now she will give you all the arguments as to why dying with the other person is not possible. I cannot die with you, for one must wait to shut the other's gaze down. You could not, and could I stand by and see you freeze without my right of frost? That's privilege. Now, shut the other person's gaze down would basically mean that when both the lovers are together, one of them has to die. One of them would be the first person to die, which means the other one is left behind. The second person to die will be the one in charge of shutting the other person's gaze down, which basically means that they will be left alone. So death's privilege thereby is when you die before your lover, you are in a way privileged to have lived all your life with your lover, and the other person who's left behind is the one who's not privileged that way. So she says, and here we also know that we also conjecture that she's speaking about Charles Wadworth, and Charles Wadworth was way elder to her, and these are all conjectures. We don't know who exactly she's addressing. She could be addressing just a persona. She's speaking from a persona, but it could be Charles Wadworth, who was a Philadelphia clergyman, and who was a father and a husband already when Emily was corresponding with him through 1858 to 1861, which is actually the most prolific time of her writing career. And she has actually written 52 poems and often wrote letters to Reverend Wadworth. And so she is assuming that she would not be able to even die with the other person, right? And death's privilege is basically of the first person. The person who would die first will not have to die alone, right? Let us look at the next stanzas. Here she says that she will not be able to get resurrection with her lover. Now we know her relationship with God. She's always debated. She's not really accepted the Calvinist faith. If we read about her life, you can understand that she is not a conventional believer of the puritanical God, which most of her contemporaries, most of her family's friends are. So she feels that she's the only person who is not believing in this idea of God. And hence she says that she cannot rise with the other person. She cannot rise. She will not be able to get resurrection. Let me read the stanzas. Nor could I rise with you, because your face would put out Jesus's that new grace, glow plain and foreign on my homesick eye, except that you than he shone closer by. Now she's here expressing a great love for her lover. She's also saying that anything else apart from her lover to her would be very bland. And that's what she says, that glow plain and foreign to my homesick eye, because to her the lover's gaze, or the lover's the sight of having the lover in front of her eyes, that's enough, much more than Jesus's grace, right? So here she's talking about resurrection, that she will not be able to get resurrection with her lover. And now that she has forsaken religion, she may not get a chance to get, this redemption or the resurrection, which this is what she means when she says, "Nor could I rise," and therefore she is more accepting of her lover's words than the grace of Jesus, than anything that the grace of Jesus would have promised her. And she's speaking like an impassioned, star-crossed lover for whom nothing is as good as speaking or listening to her lover. And here, to give you another context, 1800s to 1850s is the time when New England had a lot of religious fervor, and religious sermons had underwent a great change. Before that, religious sermons used to be bland, very puritanical, and now they are becoming more colloquial, more local, more colorful. And Wordsworth is such one such preacher, and in a way he had also led Emily to some kind of a debate and discussion about God and belief. And this is something that comes through the reading of this poem. So in these stanzas, she talks about how she will not be able to rise with her lover. Let us look at the next stanzas. They judge us how, for you served heaven, or sought to, I could not, because you saturated sight, and I had not more eyes for sordid excellence as paradise. These are the stanzas, these are the lines through which we know when she says that you served heaven, and this is the reason we conjecture that it could be Charles Wordsworth, because Charles Wordsworth was actually serving the church, and when she says that you served heaven, we think that it may be Charles Wordsworth because of these lines. And also in the next lines, which she says, I could not, which means that basically she was unable to follow the same conventions which the church wants you to follow. So she could not actually follow the beaten track, the beaten path of a typical follower, and she hasn't been able to do that. So she says that you served heaven, but I could not, because you saturated sight, and I had not more eyes for sordid excellence. So she says that I would not even be looking out for paradise as my final destination. That is sordid for me. That is unpleasant for me. I don't want that kind of a glorious end. And so that's what she says, that she would not be able to even rise with her lover. And now we reach almost towards the end of the poem. Now she says, what if you and I get resurrection, but one by one, either you are saved or I am saved. then what happens? Now she's chasing a different possibility. Now you see that there's a logic, there's a certain method in the whole poem, and in the whole argument that she's building through the poem. Now she says that what if we get resurrection, but either you get it or I get it, we don't get it together. So she says, if you were saved and I'll read the stanzas, and were you lost, I would be, though my name rang loudest on the heavenly fame. And were you saved, and I condemned to be, where you were not, that self were hell to me. So basically she says that she would not be able to even enjoy paradise, or enjoy being saved without her lover. Okay, if she was saved and he were lost, then she would be, this state would be hell without him. And if they were both saved but saved apart, that would also be a hellish situation for her. So she's again giving you a possibility, a logical possibility, which again, like every other stanza, she's discarding. So if they are both saved, then she rejects that salvation, because she will be lost in heaven. Okay, and towards the end we finally reach the last part of the poem. So we must meet apart, you there and I here, with just the door ajar, that oceans are and prayer, and that white sustenance, despair. Now here we go back to various allusions she's making. First thing, meet apart. In the first publication of a poem, this meet apart had been changed just to make it more palatable, because meeting apart is actually oxymoronic. Oxymoronic means something which is a contradiction by itself. So this phrase meeting apart is an oxymoron. So this was changed to either being apart or something else in the first publication of the poem. So she says, so this is how most of her master letters or master poems end, in this whole in the compromise situation, and in a state of an unrequited love of sorts. And this is again a common theme in so many of her poems, that she expresses love, but it remains unfulfilled towards the end. So this is a common theme which she's discussed in some other poems as well. And so you there and I here, with just the door ajar. So she's building this beautiful picture of how both the lovers are together, but in a way they are also following separate paths. So with just the door open between the two of them. It's a beautiful poem, and a beautiful way to end this poem, is because nothing seems to the lovers possible, and thereby they are together but they're meeting apart from one another. And just as oceans are and prayer, and that white sustenance, despair. So now this white sustenance is actually a Christian symbol of the Eucharist, which basically is the white bread, which is a symbolic of the last, which is symbolic of purity, which is considered to be the symbol of Jesus's body, which is consumed as a remembrance of the Last Supper. So and Eucharist is actually the Christian service, ceremony, or a sacrament which commemorates the Last Supper. So this white sustenance, this is basically how she would sustain herself, right? So meeting apart is actually what she means by white sustenance, and this is also a situation of despair for her. And I could also draw attention to the various inconsistencies in the punctuation through her poem. If we go back to the poem, we would see that randomly, alphabets are capitalized, punctuations are changed. There are a lot of dashes, which is basically enjambment, etc. So, like every other poem, she's using the same unconventional poetic devices, and like every other poem, this was also not given a title. But through the poem, we see that she is chasing a certain logical argument, and we have to be with her in order to understand the way she ends the poem. I think it's a very beautiful poem. I hope you understood the poem through the lecture. Thank you.